He had practiced the greeting 100 times on the long journey between stars. Every word was careful, respectful, and perfectly neutral, just as the diplomats on Earth had instructed. The Velathi Empire did not tolerate mistakes. One wrong tone, one wrong pause, one wrong expression could mean the end of an entire world. He was not chosen because he was the most experienced diplomat. He was chosen because he was calm, observant, and very good at staying silent when silence was the safest choice. The Velathi capital station floated like a blade of silver glass in the darkness of space. No lights flashed along its surface. No welcoming signals appeared. It simply existed, cold and precise, as if emotion itself had never touched it. Human ships were guided through silent corridors of metal until they reached the central chamber where the imperial court waited. Even before Elias stepped inside, he could feel the pressure of being watched by minds far older and far more disciplined than any human civilization. 2 Velathi guards escorted him forward. They were tall, graceful, and perfectly still, except for the slow movement of their eyes. Their armor looked grown rather than built, smooth like polished stone yet thin as skin. No sound came from their steps. No breath could be heard. It was like walking beside statues that had somehow learned to move. The doors of the audience chamber opened without a sound. Inside, everything was arranged with perfect symmetry. Dark walls curved upward into a distant ceiling filled with faint starlight. Lines of silent courtiers stood on both sides, their faces calm and unreadable. At the far end of the hall, raised above the floor, stood the imperial throne, and beside it, unmoving as the rest, was the one person Elias had studied more than any other. Princess Seralith. Images from distant probes had never captured her clearly, but seeing her in person felt different, almost unreal. Her form was tall and luminous, her skin carrying a faint glow like moonlight through water. Thin lines of silver traced patterns along her temples and down her neck, shifting softly as if responding to thoughts no one else could hear. Her eyes were pale, almost colorless, yet impossibly deep. She looked less like a ruler and more like a living piece of the quiet universe around her. Elias reminded himself to breathe slowly. He had memorized the correct distance to stop, the exact angle to lower his head, and the precise words he must speak first. These words had been negotiated for months. Every syllable had been tested to avoid offense. Humanity's survival might depend on how well he repeated them. He reached the marked place on the floor and bowed his head with controlled respect. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence inside the chamber felt heavier than gravity. Thousands of unseen sensors were likely measuring his heartbeat, his temperature, even the smallest movement of his muscles. He could almost imagine the Empire deciding in that long pause whether Earth was worth allowing to exist. This was the moment. The rehearsed words rose in his mind, clear and ready. He lifted his gaze toward the throne, and then everything changed. Because when Elias looked at the princess, the memorized speech disappeared completely. Not slowly, not partially. It was simply gone, like a page erased from existence. In its place was only a single, simple human thought, honest and unguarded. She was beautiful, not beautiful in the way humans spoke about appearance alone, but in a way that felt quiet and distant and deeply sad, like a star seen across impossible space, like something that had been lonely for a very long time. Before he could stop himself, before training or fear could return, the words left his mouth in a soft voice that carried clearly through the silent hall. Your beauty leaves me speechless. The universe seemed to stop breathing. Every Velathi in the chamber froze at the exact same instant. Guards who had shown no reaction to anything suddenly shifted their hands toward weapons that had been invisible a moment before. Courtiers turned their heads with sharp, precise motion. A low vibration passed through the air, too deep to be sound yet heavy with warning. Elias felt cold realization spread through his chest. He had made a mistake, a terrible one. He did not know the meaning of his words in their language, but the reaction told him enough. This was not a small error in etiquette. This was something far worse. No one moved to execute him immediately, which somehow made the moment even more frightening. All eyes turned toward the princess. She had not reached for a weapon. She had not spoken a command. She had not even blinked. She was completely still. At first, Elias thought she was simply choosing how to respond, the way a ruler might pause before delivering judgment. But the stillness continued too long. Seconds passed, then more. Something subtle changed in the faint silver patterns along her skin. They flickered, uneven for the first time, like light struggling through darkness. A strange expression, so small it might not have been visible to anyone without human instinct for faces, touched her eyes. Not anger, not calculation. Confusion. The vibration in the chamber grew stronger. One of the high generals stepped forward slightly, voice cold and controlled as polished metal. "The human has spoken a prohibited construct," the general said. "Permission to remove the defect." The word echoed inside Elias's mind. So that was what he had become, in a single sentence. He forced himself to remain still. Panic would only make things worse. If this was the end, he would at least face it standing. But the execution order never came, because the princess moved. It was only a small motion, her hand lifting slightly from her side. But the entire chamber reacted as if reality itself had shifted. The vibration stopped instantly. The general fell silent. Serelith's gaze remained fixed on Elias. Not the distant, indifferent look she had shown before, but something searching, almost fragile, as if she were trying to understand a sound heard long ago in a forgotten dream. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, clear, and unlike the perfectly even tones of the others. "Repeat," she said. The single word carried no anger. That frightened Elias more than anger would have. He swallowed carefully. Every survival instinct told him to apologize, to correct himself, to say anything safer. But something in her expression held him still. It was the same quiet sadness he had felt the moment he first looked at her. So he answered honestly, "I said, your beauty leaves me speechless." Silence returned, deeper than before. The silver patterns along her skin flickered again, brighter this time, then dimmed. Her breathing, so faint it was nearly impossible to see, lost its perfect rhythm for a single moment. Several courtiers shifted in visible alarm. Elias did not understand what was happening, but he knew this was no longer only about diplomacy. Something far older and more dangerous had entered the room with his words. Serelith took one slow step down from the throne platform. The movement was so unexpected that even the guards hesitated. She stopped a short distance from him, close enough that he could see faint reflections of starlight inside her pale eyes. "What is beauty?" she asked quietly. The question felt impossible, not because it was difficult, but because of how simple it was, like being asked to explain why a sunrise mattered, or why music could make someone cry. Elias searched for careful diplomatic language and found none. "It's when something makes you feel wonder," he said slowly. "When you look at it and the universe feels larger instead of smaller." A sharp sound of disapproval came from somewhere behind her, quickly silenced. She did not look away from him. "Feeling," she repeated, as if the word itself were unfamiliar. "Yes," Elias said, barely above a whisper now. Another long pause followed. Then she turned slightly toward the guards. "This human is not to be harmed," she said. Shock moved through the chamber like a sudden storm beneath still water. "He will be placed under my direct authority." The general stepped forward again, controlled but urgent. "Your Highness, exposure risk? I am aware," she said. 3 calm words. Absolute command. No one spoke after that. 2 guards approached Elias, not roughly, but with careful precision. Prisoners were probably never treated violently here. Violence required emotion. As they began to guide him away, he allowed himself one last glance back. Serelith still stood in the center of the chamber, unmoving, her gaze distant now as if turned inward toward something no one else could see. For the first time since humanity had discovered the Velathi Empire, something within that perfect, emotionless civilization had changed, and Elias Rowan had the terrible feeling that a simple human compliment might have just altered the fate of 2 worlds. He did not yet know whether that change would lead to salvation or extinction. Elias expected a prison. He expected cold walls, silent guards, and long hours of waiting for a judgment that would decide the fate of Earth. That was how powerful empires worked. They did not rush. They observed, calculated, and then acted with perfect certainty. But the place where the guards brought him was not a prison. The room was wide and quiet, shaped in soft curves instead of sharp edges. One wall was made of clear crystal that looked out into open space where distant stars burned slowly in the dark. There were no chains, no barriers, and no visible weapons. The air felt calm, almost peaceful, in a way that did not match the fear growing inside his chest. The guards stopped near the center of the room and stepped back. They did not speak. One of them touched a small silver panel beside the doorway, and the entrance sealed without a sound. Elias stood alone. For several minutes, nothing happened. He walked slowly across the smooth floor, careful not to touch anything he did not understand. Every movement felt watched, even though he could not see any sensors. The Velathi did not need visible machines. Their entire world seemed built on silent observation. He stopped near the crystal wall and looked out at the stars. Somewhere far beyond that darkness was Earth. Small, fragile, and completely unprepared for war with an empire like this. The thought tightened his throat. If he had doomed humanity with one careless sentence, he pushed the thought away. Panic would not help anyone. All he could do now was wait and speak honestly if given the chance. The door opened without warning. Elias turned quickly. Princess Serelith entered alone. No guards followed her. No advisors. No weapons. The door sealed again behind her, leaving only the 2 of them in the quiet room. For a long moment she did not speak. She simply looked at him with that same searching expression he had seen in the throne chamber. Up close, the faint silver patterns along her skin moved slowly, like distant light underwater. They were not perfectly steady anymore. Small pulses of brightness appeared and faded without rhythm. Something about that felt important, though he did not yet know why. "You are not restrained," she said at last. It was not a question. "No," Elias answered carefully. "You attempted no escape. There is nowhere to escape to." We studied him in silence again, as if measuring the meaning behind simple words. The stillness around her felt different from the stillness of the other Velathi. Theirs was empty, mechanical, by. Hers felt uncertain. "Explain the construct you spoke," she said quietly. "Beauty." The word sounded unfamiliar in her voice, like a sound not used for a very long time. Elias took a slow breath. "I'm not sure it can be explained clearly." "Attempt," she said. He searched for the simplest truth. "Beauty is not only about how something looks," he said. "It is a feeling inside the mind. When you see something beautiful, you feel warmth, wonder, sometimes even pain, because you know the moment will not last." Her silver markings flickered once, brighter than before. "Pain is undesirable," she said. "Yes," Elias replied softly, "but it also means something matters." She went very still after that. The silence stretched so long that he wondered if he had said something dangerous again. But her expression did not show anger. It showed concentration. as if she were listening to something far away. "When you spoke in the chamber," she said slowly, "a reaction occurred within my neural patterns. Irregular, uncontrolled. That did not sound like something the Velathi would tolerate. "Has that ever happened before?" he asked gently. "No." The single word felt heavy. She turned slightly toward the crystal wall, looking out at the stars the way he had earlier.
"Our species removed unstable emotional responses many cycles ago," she said. "Conflict driven by desire nearly caused extinction."
Survival required silence of feeling. Elialis listened without interrupting. "Concepts connected to emotion were erased," she continued. "Art, music, bad. Attachment, beauty." She paused on the last word, as if it resisted being spoken. "All classified as cognitive hazards." That explained the reaction in the throne room. Not anger, fear. And my words triggered something that was supposed to be gone. Elias said quietly. "Yes." He felt a chill. "Is that why the general called me a defect?" "Yes." At least she was honest. He watched her reflection in the crystal wall. "Then why am I still alive?"
Another long silence followed.
When she answered, her voice was softer than before, because the reaction did not feel like damage. The words hung in the air between them. Elias felt something shift inside his chest. Small, careful hope mixed with deeper worry. If the Empire believed humans could restore emotions, they might see humanity as a threat greater than any weapon. "Others cannot learn of this," she said. "You mean your reaction?" "Yes." "What would they do?" "They would correct the instability." A brief pause. "By removing me?" The calm way she said it made the meaning even colder. Elias stepped a little closer without thinking. "That's not correction. That's execution." She did not respond to the word, but her markings flickered again. Silence returned, quieter now, almost fragile. After a while, she spoke again. "Yes?" "Why did you speak without calculation in the chamber? You understood the risk of offense." He could have given a diplomatic answer. Training offered many safe lies. But she had shown him truth. He gave the same in return.
"Because it was real,"
he said simply. And sometimes real things come out before careful ones. She turned from the stars to look directly at him. "You value uncontrolled truth." "Yes, even when it causes harm." He thought of Earth, of history, of mistakes and forgiveness, and long struggles to become better. "Sometimes truth is the only way to stop greater harm," he said. Her gaze did not move from his face. Something in her expression softened, just slightly, but enough that he noticed. "My neural activity remains irregular," she said quietly, "since the chamber." "What does that feel like?" he asked. The question seemed to surprise her. "I do not possess language for the sensation," she said after a moment. "That might mean it's new." "Yes." They stood in silence again, but it no longer felt cold. It felt uncertain, like the moment before sunrise when darkness has not fully decided to leave. Far beyond the crystal wall, a distant star flared softly. Seralith watched it. "For many cycles," she said slowly, "I have observed stars only as navigational objects, sources of energy, nothing more, nothing more."
"And now?"
Elias asked.
"I am. Observing longer than required." A small smile touched his lips before he could stop it.
"Humans do that all the time. Why? Because sometimes looking is enough." She was quiet after that. Minutes passed.
Neither of them moved away from the window. For the first time since arriving in the Empire, Elias felt the sharp edge of fear ease slightly. Nothing was safe yet. Earth was still in danger. But the Empire was still powerful beyond measure. But something impossible had begun. Not war, not negotiation. Understanding. At last, Seralith spoke again. Her voice very soft. If emotional restoration spreads, she said, the Empire will interpret humanity as an existential threat. I was afraid of that, Elias admitted. Probability of preemptive destruction of Earth would increase to near certainty. The calm words hit harder than any weapon. Elias closed his eyes briefly, forcing himself to stay steady. Then we need to make sure they don't see emotions as a threat. That conclusion contradicts 10,000 cycles of survival doctrine, she said. Maybe your doctrine is incomplete, he replied gently. She looked at him again, and this time the uncertainty in her expression was clear. Incomplete, she repeated as if testing the idea. Yes, he said, surviving isn't the same as living. The silver light along her skin pulsed once. Slow and bright. Neither of them spoke after that. Outside, the stars continued their silent burning, unaware that in a quiet room aboard an ancient imperial station, the future of two civilizations was beginning to change in the smallest, most fragile way possible. Not through force, not through strategy, but through a question no one in the Velothi Empire had asked for thousands of years. What if feeling was not weakness, but the missing part of survival? Time moved differently inside the silent rooms of the Imperial Station. There were no sunrises or sunsets, no sounds of cities, no voices carried through open air. Only the slow rhythm of machines and the distant glow of stars beyond crystal walls. Elias began to measure the passing hours, not by clocks, but by the moments when the door opened and Princess Seralith returned. She came without warning each time, always alone, always quiet. At first she only asked questions, simple questions, spoken with careful precision, as if each word had to cross a great distance before reaching her voice. What is music meant to do? Why do humans create images that serve no function? Why do memories cause pain, even when the danger is gone?
Elias answered as honestly as he could.
Sometimes his answers felt too small for the questions. Sometimes he did not know the answer at all. But she never showed frustration. She only listened, standing near the crystal wall, watching the stars, while his words settled into a mind that had never been taught how to hold them. With each visit, the faint silver patterns along her skin changed a little more. The steady, perfect glow that marked every other Velothi was no longer constant. Soft pulses of light appeared when she heard certain ideas. Longer waves of brightness moved across her hands when she stood in silence. The change was subtle, but impossible to ignore once seen. Elias realized he was watching something that should not exist. Emotion, returning to a species that had erased it. The thought filled him with wonder and fear. Because secrets inside empires never stayed hidden forever. The first sign of danger came quietly. One cycle, Seralith entered the room later than usual. Her movements were still controlled, but slower. The silver light along her temples flickered unevenly, as if struggling to remain calm.
You must answer directly, she said without greeting. Elias straightened slightly.
What happened? External monitoring of my neural patterns has increased, she replied. The High Command suspects instability. A cold weight settled in his chest. Because of me? Yes. The word was calm, but not accusing. He forced himself to think clearly. How long before they act? Uncertain. Surveillance is still observational. A brief pause, but probability of intervention is rising. Silence filled the room. For the first time, the peaceful space felt fragile, like thin glass under pressure. We may need to stop meeting, Elias said quietly. Her gaze lifted to him quickly, not sharp, not angry, just immediate.
Negative.
She said. If they discover this, they will, she interrupted softly. The question is when. The honesty of it left no space for comfort. Elias looked toward the stars, searching for an answer hidden in distant light. Then we need another path. What path? She asked. One where your people don't fear what's happening to you. She was silent for a long moment. Fear is logical. Emotional collapse nearly destroyed our species. Maybe the problem wasn't emotion, Elias said. Maybe it was how you understood it. She studied him carefully. Explain. Humans feel everything, he said. Love, anger, hope, grief. Those feelings cause wars sometimes, but they also stop wars.
They make us protect each other, build things.
Forgive mistakes. Her silver markings pulsed faintly, like distant lightning behind clouds. You believe emotion increases survival, she said. I believe it gives survival meaning. The words settled between them. Before she could respond, a low tone echoed through the chamber walls, soft but impossible to ignore. Not an alarm, something quieter, more controlled. Saraleth went completely still. That signal is directed to me, she said. Elias felt his pulse quicken. What does it mean? Summons from the High Emperor. The air seemed to grow colder. Your father knows, Elias whispered. Unknown, she said. But suspicion is now certainty. For the first time since he met her, uncertainty showed clearly in her eyes. Not fear, exactly. Something deeper. Something new. How long do you have? He asked. One cycle before mandatory response. That's not much time. No. Silence pressed in again, heavier than before. Elias's mind raced. If the Empire decided humans were dangerous, Earth would not survive long enough to negotiate. He had to think beyond diplomacy now, beyond safety. You said others exposed to human signals might change too, he said slowly. Yes, small irregularities already detected in lower ranks. Then this isn't just about you anymore. She understood immediately. Spread of emotional response would destabilize command structure.
Or transform it, he said.
That outcome is statistically unlikely. Unlikely doesn't mean impossible. Her silver light flickered brighter than he had ever seen. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet felt like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. If transformation began, she said carefully, the Empire would classify it as infection. Then don't let them see it as infection. Choice. She did not move. Right now, emotion is happening to you, he continued. That's scary. But if your people choose it instead, it becomes strength, not weakness. Choice, she repeated softly, as if the idea itself carried weight. Another tone echoed faintly through the walls. Time was ending. Saralith turned toward the door, then stopped. When I face the Emperor, she said, probability of my removal is high. Elias felt the words like a physical blow. Then don't face him alone. Her eyes returned to his. You cannot enter the Imperial Chamber again. Maybe I don't need to, he said. Understanding began to form in her expression, slow and bright. You intend influence beyond direct presence, she said. Humans are good at that, he replied gently. A very small change touched her face then. Not a full smile. Something quieter, but real. My time is ending, she said. He nodded, though every instinct wanted to stop her from leaving. Saralith, he said softly. She paused at the sound of her name spoken without title. Yes, Elias Rowan, no matter what happens in that chamber, what you're feeling isn't wrong. The silver light across her skin rose in a slow, steady wave. I do not categorize it as wrong, she said quietly. Only unknown. Unknown things can become beautiful, he said. The word hung in the air between them, no longer forbidden, only fragile. For a long moment they simply looked at each other in silence, filled with everything neither of them knew how to say. Then, the door opened. Cold light from the corridor spilled across the floor. Saralaith stepped toward it, then stopped once more without turning around. If I fail, she said softly, Earth will be targeted. Elias forced himself to answer steadily. Then you won't fail. Your certainty lacks data. Some things don't need data. A quiet pause followed.
When this began, she said, I believed your words caused damage. And now,
I believe they revealed absence. The door waited open beside her. Without another word, she walked into the corridor and disappeared into the silent power of the Empire.
The door closed. Elias stood alone again, staring at the empty space where she had been. Far beyond the crystal wall, the stars continued to burn. Ancient, distant, unchanged. But somewhere inside the heart of the Velothi Empire, something fragile and impossible was moving toward a moment that would decide the fate of two civilizations. And for the first time since humanity reached the stars, the future would not be shaped by strength alone, but by whether a single awakened heart could change an empire that had forgotten how to feel.